This is the exercise we did in the class the other day. So I'm just going to go through it again. The first thing we've got is this image here. If I pick the selection tool, this one that's the object selection, and I go select subject, sometimes you can get unusual selections developing when it kind of tries to choose what the subject is. I quite like what it's doing with this image, how it's cutting through at the bottom here, around the graffiti. I like the oddness of the shape. So I'm going to click mask and mask it. So we've got that image, and I'll just put it to the side for a moment. Now this one here, what we've got, I've got it done already, but I'll show you the process. So if I grab the layer and I select all and I copy it or cut it, so that's Command C for copy, Command X if I want to cut it. I go to my channels, I'll make a new channel by hitting the icon down the bottom here, Command V, which is paste it. Essentially I want the image to be pure black and white. I won't worry about these bits through here, the white bits, because I can clean them up or I can put colour in them later. So I'm just trying to make it a bit contrasty. We have the middle slider, brighten up the whites a bit, black's a bit darker, and then I'll click OK. With these grey areas here, I just grab the dodge tool. At the moment it's on 30%, so that's probably pretty good. I've got a soft brush, so I'll just start painting away. I can brush around it pretty quickly and get rid of these grey areas. I can do it through the face as well. I can then get a white paintbrush. I've got a harder one this time, and I can just now fully paint out these little funny little black bits that didn't go away with the dodging. If I zoom in on here a bit, I can just get the square marquee tool. I have to go Command D to get rid of the selection that's already there. Drag around this window, and I'll just go Option Delete, which is fill with foreground colour, because my foreground colour is white. Command D gets rid of that selection, and again with a white paintbrush I can just paint some of these areas out. If I make it smaller, I can come in here with black and darken up some of these areas, make the brush a bit smaller, paint some of these little bits out. If I think this image isn't quite dark enough, I can change from the dodge to the burn tool. The exposure is up quite high, so I'm going to lower that down, and I can just brush across this and darken up the blacks a little bit. I'm worried about these little wee bits. I can get in there and clean them up. You can see down here there's a wee bit here with the white. I can go back to the dodge, try and tidy them up a wee bit or paint them out. You can see the little lines here. With black as my foreground colour, I can just again paint out some of these areas. Once I have it, Command I inverts it because it's this white area I want to select. Come down here to the selection tool, go back to my layers, and I would make a new layer. If I want the same colour, I can go I for the eyedropper tool, get the blue, and up here I can see this is the one I've got selected. Option Delete, fills with my foreground colour, which is the blue. So if I switch it off, you can see that's what I've got. Now I'm just going to delete that because I've already done it. And then what I've done is I've made a new layer underneath it. I've probably got the eyedropper tool and got the orange. And then on that layer, I've just painted behind, and I've filled in all these areas with orange. And you can see I've picked a slightly different orange now, so I just would be painting it in behind there, and that gives me this image. So I'll move that off to the side as well for a moment. This one here is a bit more difficult. If I select all and I go Command C, so select all as Command A, Command C to copy it into the channels. I would make a new channel and paste it. And again, I'm doing the same thing. I want to try and get this dog at the front, so I'd start with the levels, Command L, and I'd just try and pull it down so that I'm defining this black area, trying to make that stand out as much as I can. That's probably as far as I can go, so I'll go OK. And then I would come in here and I would do the same thing. My focus is really around the outside of this dog. So if I get the dodge tool again, I'm essentially painting out the grey. I'm stopping and clicking because it's only on 30%, so I can't do it all in one go, and I can't do it with one brush size. So I come in here and try and tidy it up, and I'll do just around the head of the dog instead of doing the whole thing, because I've already done this image. So I'm going around. Really, I'm just trying to get rid of that outside area. I'm just trying to isolate the dog. And then with a white as my foreground colour, I would go and just paint out these areas that I couldn't get rid of with the dodge tool. A bit bigger, and again, it's a nice hard brush because I've done the dodging, get rid of some of these areas, and because I'm really just working with the mask, I can control this line a bit more. I'm going to Command plus up so I can get a closer look around here. And again, I'm just tidying up that edge a wee bit. Once I've got it the way I want it, I switch around to black and I paint up to that line. So it's like a colouring an exercise, just making the silhouette so I can get the shape of that dog. And again, just doing the head. You can see there's little wee grey bits that I could still tidy up further if I want, but this is just to give you an idea. It's a little bit of a more manual process. This one, going through and sorting it out. Command minus. I'll make that brush a little bigger here. And if I do this, so I've selected that area. If I go Command Shift I, which is inverse, you can see it gets everything else. Command Delete, and I end up with this thing here. Now I'm just going to, and then I can Command I and load it up. And what you'll see if I get rid of this is that I've already done it here. I've already masked it out. Now one of the things I want you to see, and in this case, because I'm going to degrade the image, I usually duplicate that layer and channel by dragging it on the new layer icon. Switch that bottom one off. and we'll come in here and have a look. So a couple of things, like for instance, if I wanted the nose to be round, I could click on the mask using white, a nice hard edge. I'll make the circle a bit smaller. I can click and tidy that edge up a wee bit. Same here, if I make a smaller brush, I can actually paint more manually. So I can click here, and while I'm clicking and holding down, I get the shift. I put shift down, I let go of the mouse, and then when I click here, it draws a straight line. I'll draw around the curve a bit, and then I'll do the same thing while I'm holding the mouse down. I'll hold the shift key down, let go, click, and it draws a straight line. It was a bit further out, so I'll come back, hold down the shift key while the mouse is down, let go of the mouse, click, and it just draws that straight line in. Now you can see that there's a bit of funny colour coming in behind. So what I do is I click on the layer, I hit I, so I get the eyedropper, and I'll just pick that black colour. Now with the paintbrush, if I paint in here with that colour, go around, so I'm kind of getting rid of that, that green. If I come in here, just paint, doesn't matter if I go over the edge, I'm just painting in there. You don't want to go over the image because then you're actually painting onto the image. And I'll show you if I go, hold down the shift key and I click the mask to switch it off, you can see I'm actually just scribbling colour onto the actual image. Shift click on the mask, but it's the mask that controls what we see. Same here, we know that black blocks, so I can tidy up this little bit on the snout of the dog if I want. Command 0, and I end up with this guy here. So I'll drag it off to the side. And so what I'll do now is I'll start dragging them over. So I'll grab, whoops. So I'll start dragging them over. I'll make sure I've got the layer selected, drag it over. Well, that lock is there. Move it. So now I can get rid of that one. I don't need to save it. This one, there's two layers, so I need to shift, click on both of them. I can drag it from the layer menu as well, and that will drag it over. I can now close this one and get rid of it. This last one, same thing. Here's my image. I can drag it from here with the arrow tool, or I can drag it from there, and that brings it in. Now I've got all these images, but now I want to try and do something with them, blend them together in a much more interesting way. So click on the dog, and I'll just move it over a little. I'm going to switch off the eye beside these two and move this layer up, so it's these two that I'm focusing on right above each other. Now if I click on the painted wall, I can change the opacity down, and then I can move it over. I'll use the arrow keys. If I hold down the shift key, hit the arrow keys, it moves in bigger increments. Now I'm just using the arrow keys. So I'm trying to line it up with the edge of this ear. I might move it down a little, and when I'm happy with that, I can just bump it back up to 100%. Now in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with using the selection from one thing on the mask of another. So I'll blow it up, and if I command click on the mask of the dog, you can see it's still got that area highlighted. That's still the area I'm working on. So I need to click onto the mask that's associated with the wall. Now it's got this dog selected, so if I go Command Shift Inverse, it's got everything outside the dog selected. And I can check this by going Command 0, because you don't see anything change, and you can see the line around the edge, and that's an indication that I've got all of this area selected if I go Command Shift I again, it's gone. So it's just the dog that's selected. So Command Shift I can see it's the background, and now Command plus to enlarge, and if I hold down the space bar I'll get the hand tool and I can shuffle things around on the screen. So now I know that black blocks out. I'll get slightly soft brush and I'll use the right square bracket to blow it up a little. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in here black blocks, but when it hits that selection it won't go over it because I've got the outside selected. So I can just paint roughly and the selection is going to block it. So I can't draw over the center of this. I can't ruin that image. But now if I go Command Shift I, it will be the opposite. It will be the dog that's now selected, or the inside of that shape. I'm still on the same mask for the wall, but now I can get a nice soft brush. I can change the opacity down to about half, so I'm just kind of building it up. It's a bit lower than half, but that's fine. I'm blowing the brush up bigger by using the right square bracket. And I can paint this. You can see it's softening, but it hasn't completely got rid of everything. So I let go, do it again, and it will completely disappear. So I can control the amount that I eat into this, this image. I'm going to do it a few times here because I want to kind of clean the air up. I can make the brush a bit smaller if I want as well. There we go. So I'm using the selection of the dog to control that. Now, if I look at this image, I'll go Command D to get rid of the selection. I quite like what's happening with the heart. So I want the heart to be nice and clean over the top, but still have all the softness around the edge of it. So if I Command click, so I've got the dog selection, and then I go to my channels. I've already got it done here, but I'll do it again. If I make a new channel and I just go Command delete, so all I'm doing is filling it with white, and then Command D to get rid of the selection. You can see there's a few little bits here, so if I wanted to be finicky I could change the foreground color to white, and I could paint some of these things out. If I came back up to 100%, I might want a hard brush so I don't go over that edge. Anyway, that's just me being finicky. If I come back to the layers and I click on a layer so it jumps back to that mode, I can get my paintbrush selection tool, because I'm now looking at the layers, but this dog's in the way. So if I just switch that off so I can see the heart, and if I shift click on the mask beside the wall, because then I can see the heart. So now that I can see it, I can select this white area. You can see it's not working properly, and that's because I'm still on the wrong layer. So I'll go Command D. I have to click on the layer that I want to be working on. Now the program realizes and goes, okay, so it's trying to select that. There's a little bit here that's glitched out, so if I hold down the Option key, I can tidy up that edge a little bit. So now with the selection, I can go back to my channels. I can find, by clicking on Alpha 3, this mask of the dog that I had. Now that I've loaded up that selection, I want to fill it with black. I can see black's my background color, so I'll go Command delete, and then I'll go Command D to get rid of the selection. It's only the white that's going to be selected. So if I load this up by hitting the selection tool, go to my layers, and I'll switch these things back on. So I'll switch the eye on beside the dog. I'll shift click on the mask. I can't see it yet, so I'll click back on that layer. My selection's still just sitting there floating, but it's just so I can see what's going on. And then what I can do is, at the moment, it has this area here selected inside the dog. So if I go Command Shift I, it will have everything outside the dog selected. I swap my foreground color around that's white, because I know that white is going to show the image. So this dog ear here, so I'm back on the mask again. I paint it. And it's going to show that image up. And of course the selection stops me from running over the edge. Go Command D, and now you end up with this kind of more complicated image. It's a lot more interesting. Got a lot more control that's starting to happen. So let's try a similar thing with the images we've got down here of the head. If I shift click, so I've got both of them together, I can go Command T and I'll scale it up a bit. I'll hit return, and I might drag those two up the top so I can see them. I'm just going to check by changing the opacity down to see where this head lines up, and I quite like that. I can see the eyes, it's all good. So I'll push that back up to 100. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag these two back down below everything else, and I'm going to duplicate them. They're both selected, so I'm going to go down to the new mask icon, and this one, or these two I should say, these two new ones, I'm going to drag right up to the top. So I want them to be affected by this layer. I actually want to use the layer options, but layer options only work with one image above and one image below. So I need to make these images a single image. So if I click on the top one, I can go Command E, which is the same as coming up to this little hamburger menu and going merge down. So it merges these two together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to control it, and if I switch the eyes off beside the one down here, I'll be able to see what happens. Hold down the Option key, click on the mask beside the wall, and duplicate it. Just drag it up and it will copy it. And I can see now exactly what's going on. If I double click on my layer, I can use these layer options and say, okay, I'll use the image underneath because it's got all the color in it. This is the lightest areas of the wall coming through. How does that look? Yeah, okay. Maybe I'll let the darkest areas come through. Yeah, maybe that's interesting. It's interesting around here, around the heart, because it's the darkest areas. It's still holding off with the red. So we'll go with that. So it's doing quite a nice job with that heart. So I'll go okay. And if I do want to tidy it up a wee bit, I can go to the mask for that one and say black's going to block, so maybe I'll just take a little bit out there so it looks like it's coming in behind the heart but not sticking out this side. Okay, I'm happy with that. So what I'll do now is I will duplicate that image, and I'm now going to put it above the dog. The mask is the wrong mask now, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag that mask to the trash can. It'll say apply it or delete it. Don't want to apply it, I want to delete it. This brings me back to my normal image. It's a little bit funny looking at the moment, and that's because if I double click, still got these settings on it, so I'll take that off and it'll go back to normal. Now I want the mask of the dog because you can see it's going to affect a lot of other things. So if I hold down the Option key, I drag the mask of the dog up beside it. Now I can focus on what it's doing here. First thing I'm going to do is I want it to be different to what's happening up here, so I'll click on it and I'll try some layer options. Multiply, color burn, go through some of these, see if there's something that I really like the look of. There's some interesting stuff. Sometimes overlay can look quite good. I'll put it on. I'll try color burn. I can still do the same thing. I can double click on this and I can play around with these layer options. Here I'm letting the dark areas through. Oh, that doesn't look so good. I'll let the light areas through. Oh, I like the way that that's kind of eating into the image. I can soften it by holding down the Option key and splitting that triangle. That's looking a bit more interesting to me. I'll go OK. It's nice how the eye is working with that coloration and everything just there. And now if I switch the eye on for these images underneath, I start to get a far more interesting interplay between the images. I can still click on this image that's underneath and I can say, okay, well, what happens if I change the color of that? What happens if I get the eyedropper tool? I click on the red, I go Option Shift Delete and modify the color. If I change this to some of these other options, you can see the way it interacts with the orange underneath. I thought that multiply might have worked quite nicely, but doesn't seem to be working so well. Actually, I'm just going to click on the blue and change the color to that. Now the multiply is a bit more interesting because the blue shows up the orange behind. The red was too similar in color. Now with all of this, I can just go for the layout, so I can click on the top image, shift, click on the bottom one, everything except for the background, click the folder icon and it will chuck everything in the folder. Oh, looks like I missed an image right at the top, so I'll do that again. That's the very top image. Click, get my bottom one, shift, click, make a folder, and everything's in a group. Now this means that because it's all in a group, I can go Command T, I can scale it a little if I want, hit return, move it around until I get it placed nicely, and I'll get the eyedropper tool and I'll pick the light color on the dog's here and I'll just click on the background and go Option Delete. Change the color, or maybe if I find that a bit dark, I might make it a wee bit more yellow. Option Delete again, and it fills that background. So the same process you've been using, but now we're making it a little bit more complicated. Now we're using the mask from one thing, or the selection from one thing, and using it on the mask of something else. And this is where you can start to get some really interesting things happening. If I switch off the eye beside all these head images, just so it's easier to see, everything's got a lock. So now if I click on the wall image and I click on the lock so the lock's gone, the mask will stay where it is. So now if I move this, you can end up with some interesting patterns happening. I'll do the same with the dog. I'll unlock it. And it's the same way if I click on the mask, the dog will stay there and I will just move the mask. Command Z, the other way around, if I click on this, the mask will stay there and I will just be affecting the dog. Command Z, I actually liked it the other way around. I liked it more when I moved the mask. Some of these things like this become a lot more interesting. This one will obviously still line up because of the mask. This one now will be in a different place because the mask stayed where it was, and on this one we moved the mask. Switch the two on at the bottom, and yeah, so you can end up with something that becomes a lot more interesting as it becomes abstracted, and all that is unlinking between those two things and playing around with it. What does it look like if we unlink this one here that's over the dog? Whoops, I need to click on the right thing. So there, on that image, the hair moves. You know, maybe we can end up with a little bit more of an interesting form. So again, the same tools, just moving it a step further.